I'm Chris Harris, Director of Exhibitions at ACMI, and I'm here with Tim Black and Deb Adams from BKK Architecture to talk about ACMI's renewal program at Federation Square. Just before we kick off, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we virtually meet on. We're not standing on the land, but nevertheless, it's the land that ACMI occupies at Federation Square. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and pay our respects to their elders past and present. So yeah, we're with Tim Black and Deb Adams. We've been working on ACMI's renewal project for over 4 years. Tim and Deb have been on the project for at least 2 or 3 of those years, I think. And we're actually coming to fruition. I've just come from a site visit, which was really exciting. It's looking fantastic. And we're only a few months away from reopening ACMI. Obviously, things have changed a little bit in the COVID period that we're in now, but and so our opening has been delayed a little bit. That's given us a bit more time to sort of polish things in a way and stand back and have a look at how it's all going, and it's looking fantastic. I thought I'd just talk a little bit about the origins of the project and what ACMI was looking for in our renewal of the museum and our program and everything we do, really. ACMI is a 20-year-old organisation, so it's pretty young. But we thought it was a good time. Katrina Sedgwick, our director, who's been with us for probably 5 years now, came on board, and it was one of her visions really was to renew the whole organisation from bottom up, including the building and the experience programs and the brand, everything, and that's what we're in the middle of, and that's what we're working with BKK on. So jump in anytime you'd like, guys, and I know you've got some images and things to show us of the building and the work you've been doing. But I'll just go back maybe through the process a little bit. I guess it was 4 years ago that we started thinking about renewing our whole building and what being a museum in the 21st century meant. And we did a bunch of research with our staff, with our visitors, and with experience companies like Meld. We did a big project with Meld, really looking at the experience journey of visitors coming to our building and the sorts of issues that they came up against as they entered our building, and the successful parts of their journey and the less successful parts of their journey through ACMI. One of the issues of coming to ACMI at Federation Square has always been that it is at Federation Square, and a lot of people don't necessarily understand that they're at ACMI. ACMI was sort of subsumed inside Federation Square, and that's both a sort of big advantage and a disadvantage, because people can go away from a pizza program as big and bold as the David Bowie exhibition we did a few years ago and just think that they've been at Federation Square and not realise that they've come to an ACMI experience. But we did that work with Meld, which told us a lot about how people came and perceived ACMI and discovered it and explored our building. Threw up a lot of problems and a lot of interesting issues for us. And then we commissioned a company called Artifact to do a master plan to reimagine the whole building. And they gave us a bunch of guiding principles around experience and making stories in physical spaces, which I think with BKK and other collaborators, Second Story, we've really seen through to this day, and we can talk about those. But I guess the master plan was about three years ago, and then we put together a brief for what we were really looking for, which was a museum that had a much more open and welcoming attitude and a lot more social spaces, and a space that was more apparent. ACMI's program is quite difficult to see because it's hidden away in corners. There's like digital classrooms that people couldn't see, and cinemas. A lot of people didn't even realise we had cinemas. There was a massive permanent exhibition that was really popular, but there was no sort of street frontage for our building, and people couldn't really tell what we did. And the other big part of the renewal and the reason we chose to work with Second Story, who are a US-based exhibition and experience design company, was to renew the permanent exhibition and really bring the whole permanent exhibition, which, as I said, was 10 years old, into the 21st century. What does talking about film and media and digital media mean, and having an exhibition about that mean now? So that's sort of the background, and now we're at the exciting point of hopefully showing everyone what we've done. over to you guys. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you responded to the original brief that ACMI put out?
Yeah, great, Chris. Sure. I mean, I think one of the really interesting things about this brief was the manner in which BKK as the architects were paired with the international exhibition and experience design firm in Second Story that Chris mentioned a moment ago, in an incredibly tightly woven collaboration that drew aspects of the experience through the entire design thinking, and I think drew aspects of architecture through the exhibition space as well. And I think it really was a fantastic collaboration. We absolutely relished the opportunity of working with the Second Story team. It was invigorating experience. It was really fantastic, and working in a tripartite collaboration, obviously with ACMI and a range of other partners.
Yeah, I think it was a risky undertaking in some ways to bring together an experience and exhibition design company who were sort of overseas and a long way away, and a local. We really wanted to work with a local architectural firm and to sort of put you on a level pegging in many ways to collaborate genuinely with us rather than have anyone, the client or the architect or even the experienced designers, lead the project. It was, there were risks in it, but I think it's come off really well.
Yeah, and look, I think ACMI did well to choose the architects and the exhibition and experience designers with similar attitudes, I think, and a willingness to collaborate. That was really a very strong foundation for a good design partnership. I might mention, Chris, we obviously, as architects, we're constantly working with notions of experience, spatial experience and social experience and so forth. But for us, it was fascinating working in or with an approach that was so explicit about experience. Along with our own wayfinding and visitor experience sub-consultants Bureau North, both also we really adopted a very strong experience-based approach to this project. I think what also helped was the very good foundational work that Old Studios had done, along with the master planning work, really provided some really strong guidance to us at the outset. So I'm thinking, for example, of the experience mapping work that Mel did was very interesting. And that really allowed us to jump in with Bureau's assistance to do a lot of front-end opportunities and constraints understanding around the site to really pick apart what the ACMI experience has previously been, and also to identify what it could be going forwards.
Yeah, I think, a lot of that work was invaluable, and it built on the great successes of the Federation Square site, but also the challenges. As I said before, being in Federation Square has its challenges, and I know that you also consulted with Lab Architecture quite closely as you developed the project. It'd be good to hear a bit more about that later.
Yeah.
Because Federation Square, it has its attractors and detractors. People love it or hate it. For us, it's a fantastic place to be. We love it. But it is, as I said, it's challenging. We have a museum that works across 4 floors of a building, and those floors aren't always apparent from the outside. And I think, Mel identified that really strongly, that people would come in and not necessarily see and understand the program. So some of the sort of big physical moves that you talked about that you've done really and built on the artefact work would be good to understand. And it's a pity we can't be in the building and show people how you've sort of brought those levels together and started to open out the building, I guess, because it was really built on top of the lab notion of intersecting laneways and the laneways in the city on the other side of Flinders Street, and the idea of exploring and getting lost and finding your way through, which is a great architectural notion, but challenging for a museum when your visitors don't always know where they are or where to go.
Yeah, well, look, it's worth reflecting too on the history of the Alfred Deacon building, of which ACMI are one of a number of tenants, really the key tenant occupying all of the entry-level floors on the Flinders Street and Federation Square entrances. But that building was originally designed as one of the few commercial centres across the site as a shopping mall in all effects. And as you rightly point out, Chris, you know, the very strong foundation in urban terms of the lab scheme was the extension of the laneway language across to the south side of Flinders Street and allowing those laneways in the north-south orientation in particular, which is typically the orientation of Melbourne cut-throughs that connect our little streets with our main thoroughfares. Federation Square was very much trying to take that laneway approach and extend the laneways from the city to the river. What was obvious to us and others before us as well was that the connection through the Alfred Deacon building is circuitous. It was difficult to navigate. There was a escalator access off to one side, which made it slightly less obvious how to connect from Flinders Street up to Federation Square. And one of the things that it meant was that there wasn't a lot of time that one could spend inhabiting one of really the most beautiful spaces within Lab Scheme, and that is the atrium space within the Alfred Deacon building. You mentioned too, Chris, that ACMI is rich in its offerings. It's got occupies 4 floors across the Alfred Deacon building, and those functions were largely separated out on each of the floors. So along with the challenges of the circuitous route through from Flinders Street to Federation Square and the separation of quite distinct offerings with sometimes quite distinct and separate audiences and visitor groups, meant that there was some disjunct between your various audiences. And I think one of the very strong themes that came through to us was the importance of connecting the community of ACMI users. And so in some ways, the really obvious move that was preempted very much by the master planning work before us was to create a grand stair, what we termed ultimately the living stair, that fully and properly connects in a continuous single line of sight and easy movement, a grand stair that links the ground floor up to the Federation Square level. And I think, if we were to highlight one of the key moves that probably transforms, or hopefully will transform, the institution, it's that one. It's the grand stair gesture that in some ways delivers on the promise of Lab's vision for a laneway that was never quite realised in the Alfred Deacon building as it was built. And of course, look, to be fair on Lab, one of the challenges was that the building was designed for one purpose and quickly inhabited by Cinemedia, which was ACMI's precursor, became ACMI, I believe, Chris, shortly after occupying the building.
Right.
So it was not ever a built-for-purpose cultural centre. And I think the renewal project has really created that opportunity to adaptively reuse a really wonderful building and hopefully connect those floors and connect the city and the river in a way that was never quite realised.
Yeah, I think we've got a rendering we can show people of what the stair does, but maybe Deb can explain, because we were standing on the stairs yesterday enjoying it, and I was just loving how it's opened up the atrium and made parts of the building that were normally quite invisible. There's a beautiful, I think it's zinc wall along the side of one of our buildings that now you come up the stairs and it's just this beautiful thing that you could never see before. So Deb, maybe just could you explain to people a bit about how you've opened up the building and how the stair works and the other social spaces around it?
I think one of the things with that that's probably worth noting as well is just what we've done on level 1 as a sort of lesser move, but is still quite key with that. We've obviously punched this really beautiful timber staircase from ground all the way up to level 1, which is it's really generous place where you can not only just use it as a vehicle to get you from A to B, but also to sit. One of the things that ACMI's always identified to us is that there's never a lot of dwell space for people to just sort of pause and actually enjoy how nice that atrium space was. And now we have a hybrid seating event space there. You know, every bit of ACMI works incredibly hard because of the spatial and area challenges that we have. Every bit of, I guess, intervention we've sought to do is multi-layered. You know, we're trying to, I guess, squeeze every last little bit of space out of the building that we put in, and really use it in a sort of variety of ways. One of the things that I really like is the sort of mid-level view that you get that you've never been able to get before, and also by moving the event space, which was previously known as the Cube, that was on Flinders Street, up to level 1, you get this really nice view where you get to look back on the stairs and actually get these glimpses into that event space, which even when it's unoccupied will still be a beautiful space to sort of look into and kind of make you a bit more inquisitive about what goes on in there, and I guess allow members of the public that are visiting the gallery space to see some of those other functions that ACMI has that were previously hidden away. And as Tim was saying about the sightlines, also by reorienting the stair that goes up to the cinemas has actually opened that view up considerably and made a really big difference from Federation Square level, and again really opens that fantastic view up to Flinders Street and the heritage facade that's opposite. So I think even just that as a sort of minor gesture sort of really supports that bigger move as well.
Yeah, I think so. There's a rendering of that view as you come in off Federation Square. And I think that's going back to the experience work. That's one of the real successes of the whole scheme, is that it opens the whole building up and draws people into the heart of the building, which didn't happen before. You'd come in off Federation Square and there was this sort of box office right in front of your face with tickets here, and you couldn't see anything else beyond that at all. Now you get drawn into the centre. There's this beautiful warm wooden timber staircase that takes you down to the rest of the building, but as you go past, there's a nice social space. Cafe's still there on the right. It's really obvious that there's cinemas up at the top of the stairs now, which were never there before. It's really successful. And that's maybe a good segue into talking about working with Second Story as well, because they've done some of the interior design of that space, which we're just calling the Fed Square Foyer at the moment, which is a real multifunction space. But I guess it was you guys who've opened up the architecture and changed the real estate, if you like, and then they've sort of started working with you to make those experiences really work for people. Hopefully they will. And now there are places where our visitors, this is what we're really excited about, our visitors can come, just relax, sit down and hang out with their friends and understand where they are and what ACMI's about, use their phones and their devices if they want, go to the cafe if they want. There wasn't any of those places in ACMI. You either went to a piece of program, all of which were quite sort of siloed from each other, or you sort of tended to leave the building. So really looking forward to seeing people use those spaces.
I think that space, Fed Square Foyer, was really something that, was a very much a joint piece of thinking in the master plan that, where I guess collectively we did sort of challenge some of the initial brief, because I think that was referred to as audience lab previously from memory, and we really felt it was really important to get this sort of hybrid space onto level 1 where you don't necessarily have the gallery spaces to really, so you still get a flavour of what ACMI is on that level, but it's also not a sort of as well defined a gallery space. It's sort of this quite blurry multi-purpose space that can be an event space, that can be a beta testing space for some artists that you've got as part of the programming. So again, it sort of allows you to really make your spaces work hard for you and really cross-layer not only the program but the audience as well, in that, you know, you could have people in the building that might traditionally just come and go to your cinema matinees, but then they could be sitting there and there's school kids beta testing video games. So that cross-pollinisation of your audience is sort of...
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, that was really strong desire from ACMI's side, was to mix our program up and have spaces where those sort of, you know, whether it's film lovers or exhibition goers or gamers, who they could mingle and see each other's programs running alongside each other. That was really, really important for us, and I think that's working really well. The other thing about that space, and Tim might talk a bit about this, is we've worked with Second Story to design what we're calling a cabinet of curiosities, an exhibition part of the Fed Square foyer, which also has the media preservation lab, which is an actual ACMI working space where you can see our collection staff working to preserve film and other things in our collection. And that idea of bringing out the program is also part of the exhibition. So there's a new permanent exhibition, but trying to bring the exhibition out into the whole building and allow it to sort of inhabit the whole space is really important as well.
Yeah, well, look, the Cabinet of Curiosities is very much that idea, Chris, of trying to allow some of the permanent exhibition displays to infiltrate other levels. And in the manner that Deb has mentioned, allowing that cross-pollination of visitors who would traditionally maybe only come for one specific purpose to get a taste of what's down in a permanent gallery and get them, you know, excited about broader aspects of moving image culture, for example. The Media Preservation Lab is a really interesting one because it sits behind part of a moving section of the Cabinet of Curiosities that every quarter will be pulled out with an open workshop style environment, staffed by ACMI preservation experts. And it will allow visitors with, for example, old digital media, 5 3/4 inch floppy disk, for example, Chris, remember them?
I do, sadly.
To get some tips on, you know, how do we as a culture preserve some of those treats of, you know, former moving image that we might want to preserve? How do we transfer them to newer modern media, or how even do we allow the old media to survive and thrive as well?
Yeah,
that's a interesting, active and, you know, interfacing bit of ACMI that we're super excited about, Chris, because, you know, it's really bringing the passion, the community's passion, and the institution's passion for media together. Maybe you want to talk about that more, Chris, because that's...
Yeah, well, I think that's... I mean, thinking about the Media Preservation Lab, that's a classic example of the sort of invisible parts of ACMI. We've always had a big collection of film and videotape and digital things like games and artworks and so on. that a lot of people had no idea about, and there's always been a team working on them, and academics knew a lot about them, or producers and other people would come and access it, but not public really. So it does speak really well to the new principle, I guess, of trying to engage people with those things and let them participate in them and understand them, but also just that idea of making them more explicit. The idea that we do have cinemas and you can come and see a film anytime at ACMI is now hopefully really going to be very obvious from the outside as soon as you come in. But finding those sort of hidden things, the fact that we do, thousands of school visits every year, and they come and make films, and we have digital classrooms. Now you can find them and see them, and that's really important. And also the working with Second Story as experienced designers rather than sort of interior designers or exhibition designers, I think was really important, because they understood the idea that the exhibition was an experience and that everything in the exhibition should link to everything else in the building. So that sort of crossover of trying to map the program onto the building that I think you've both done really successfully is going to be really interesting to see people come and visit, and inhabit, because it's we talked a lot about the layers of the building. We've got a major exhibition space. There's a basement, down, used to be platform 14, down in the basement. And if you come in on the Federation Square level, you really had to go down 3 levels of staircases or escalators to get there. Now you still have to go downstairs, but you sort of flow down this beautiful big staircase, which hopefully will have people hanging out and enjoying the rest of what ACMI does, either on their devices or just talking about it and watching it.
Yeah, and look, we're it's worth mentioning, Chris. I think you touched on it in passing, but down at the Flinders Street level, the stair itself extends under cinema to create what we've termed the urban lounge. And this is really an extension of the idea that Deb was touching on about solving the problem that ACMI had identified through various studies and its own insight, that dwell was always a big challenge to the institution, its previous incarnation. There just was so few opportunities to sit and pause. So down on the ground level now, what we're hoping to provide is what is termed in urban and sociological terms as the third place, or a third place, I should say, which is one of those sort of interstitial community places that urban dwellers seek out now, particularly in places like Melbourne, inner city Melbourne, that are very dense. People living in apartments are looking for places to connect with their communities that unlike the places traditionally provided in the suburbs. And cultural institutions are fantastic versions of that. I mean, I think if you think of for example, the resurgence of libraries as places not simply for borrowing books, but places for a communal experience. So people will go to the library and they might just work on their homework on their laptop, and they might do that as a way to be part of and amongst a community. So we're hoping that a lot of the elements now within ACMI's public spaces will provide those sort of opportunities to connect people, and connect people that might just be passing through ACMI in the manner of using the atrium space as a cut through, as a laneway, and might just prop and pause, recharge their phone, and hopefully discover something new about ACMI on the way through too.
Yeah, I think so. That's great. That's, as you said, libraries have really led the way, I think, in the sort of late 20th century, and museums are catching up as well. It's the living stair, all those spaces are really going to change the way people come and have the building. It's a good segue maybe for Deb to tell us a bit about some of the challenges of working in an existing building at Federation Square. So I know it hasn't been always easy. It's a complex building, Federation Square. It's built over railway lines, as I mentioned before. Gallery 4 runs alongside the railway lines. The whole thing is a suspended platform on springs, which a lot of people might not know. The square itself, so the trains can run underneath it, and the electrical trains, there's electromagnetic shielding to stop the trains interfering with things like, digital museums, infrastructure. And, all people who work there famously say, if you can find a right angle in the building, good luck, because there isn't any, they're all triangles. And it's not an easy building, Deb. How's that been?
Look, I'm pretty fortunate. I can probably tell by the accent I'm not from Australia, so I've got a fair bit of experience from working in the UK with buildings. They're always fun challenges. You never quite know what you're going to find. I think certainly there's always an unpicking of, especially things around services. They're always there. Sometimes the things that the less glamorous side that people don't think about, but are very important in institutions such as this, because they really are the backbone, especially one that's so technology heavy. So, as services engineers, Mott MacDonald have done a lot of research on site. You spend a lot of time there crawling in and out of ducts and other unpleasant places I wouldn't want to have to go. But it's also helped. We've had the original structural engineer, Pat Strickland from Arcadis, actually works on the original building, and his knowledge has been pretty invaluable in that respect. So that's been really, really helpful, and certainly helped with the nuances of a very complex and very hard-working structure, because the building also has the plaza coming into the permanent gallery at the basement level, which is quite unusual. And they're two separate structures, which gave us challenges at certain points. But no, those kind of challenges are always the fun ones, keep you on your toes. So if it was too easy, you wouldn't enjoy it.
It is an amazing bit of engineering, Federation Square, a lot of which is sort of quite hidden, but it is complex, as you say, very complex building in the middle of the, we worked very closely with Second Story on the details of the exhibition design, I was saying before, and even though we I can't remember what you call it, resurveyed, remapped the entire, all the floors of the building, we still found two columns that we didn't know existed, and had to redesign the exhibition spaces around them as we sort of uncovered them, which are obviously pretty important to hold the building up. It's definitely got its challenges. It's been fun. Well, that's a good way to end. I think it's going to be really exciting for people to come in and visit the new permanent exhibition, which we're now calling The Story of the Moving Image, and see all the new social spaces, of which the Fed Square Foyer we mentioned is one, but there's also the living stairs, we've been calling it. But there are other spaces. We've also moved the shop downstairs with you guys, and I think that's great, because the shop now has some street frontage, which we've never had before, and that's going to be a big change for everything. And it sort of it's really nicely located at the end of both of our major temporary exhibition spaces. And then there's all the studio spaces. So we're sort of talking about it as cinema levels, lab levels, and exhibition level, and the exhibition level being the Flinders Street level. So there's going to be lots for people to come and explore and see that's really different. Our whole building has completely changed.
There's some interesting things, Chris, too, happening across the city in parallel. And the obvious one is Melbourne Metro upgrades.
Yeah, of course.
Will be delivering a whole new generation of audience to ACMI's doorstep, we hope, popping up from the Shard in Federation Square, where the new metro is out on that side. And as a result of the metro, of course, there's some really interesting things happening even along Flinders Street. Albeit temporary, there's a new pedestrian crossing directly across the road from the shop entrance, which is fabulous.
We're very excited about that. You can now come straight down Hosier Lane off Flinders Lane across into Federation Square and to ACMI, the Atrium, NGV It's really exciting. Yeah.
That's right. So have a taste of contemporary cave painting, walk across the road and experience true 21st century culture.
That's great. Well, thanks for your part in changing our building. It's really fabulous. We're very excited about it, and it really does look fabulous. And looking forward to welcoming people maybe next year for Open House to come and see it in person. But thanks again, you guys. It's been a really exciting journey.
Oh, thank you too, Chris. It's been a joy working with you and the ACMI team for us.
Great, thanks. And a shout out to Deacon Story as well, who aren't with us because they're all in States in the middle of the night, but their part in the whole thing was really exciting and valuable as well. Thanks, Tim and Deb. That was fantastic. And we'd, of course, from ACMI, really like to thank Open House for giving us the opportunity to introduce our new building to you and talk through the project. Cool. Thanks a lot, you guys. Bye-bye.